Today is March 27th. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It's a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today out of the Big Book, we are going to continue our story through Pioneer number 7, The Man Who Mastered Fear, pages 251 through 254. And out of the 12 steps, we are going to be beginning step 11. We are going to read page 96 today. So with all that, my friends, I hope you're doing well this morning. Hey, I'm doing great. Got my cup of coffee. We got a new set at 24 hours. Life is good. So let's get right to the good stuff. So if you can recall from yesterday's reading, our friend, Pioneer number 7 here, the man who mastered fear, he has some pretty severe irrational fears, and he's using alcohol to treat it for a while until, of course, it becomes the second main problem in his life, or another problem in his life besides the fear. And he eventually, through a friend, gets connected with Dr. Bob and his wife Ann and ends up living with them temporarily. And when he's having one of his panic attacks, he decides to turn to prayer. That's what Dr. Bob has really been preaching, is how much prayer has helped. And I love these last few lines here. It says, finally, and I shall never know how much later it was, one clear thought came to me. Try prayer. You can't lose, and maybe God will help you. Just maybe, mind you. Having no one else to turn to, I was willing to give him a chance, although with considerable doubt. I got down on my knees for the first time in 30 years. The prayer I said was simple. It went something like this. God, for 18 years, I have been unable to handle this problem. Please, let me turn it over to you. I love the next line. Immediately, a great feeling of peace descended upon me, intermingled with the feeling of being suffused with a quiet strength. A few lines down, nothing had changed, yet everything had changed. I love that. That is a beautiful way to describe sobriety. So we are going to continue on that, beginning on page 251, the third paragraph down. It is well over 16 years since I came back to life. I have never had a drink since. This alone is a miracle. It is, however, only the first of a series of miracles that have followed one another as a result of my trying to apply to my daily life the principles embodied in our 12 steps. I would like to sketch for you the highlights of these 16 years of a slow but steady and satisfying upward climb. Poor health and a complete lack of money necessitated my remaining with Dr. Bob and Ann for very close to a year. It will be impossible for me to pass over this year without mentioning my love for and my indebtedness to these two wonderful people who are no longer with us. They made me feel as if I were a part of their family, and so did their children. The example that they and Bill W., whose visits to Akron were fairly frequent, set for me of service to their fellow men, imbued me with a great desire to emulate them. Sometimes during that year I rebelled inwardly at what seemed like lost time and at having to be a burden to these good people whose means were limited. Long before I had any real opportunity to give, I had to learn the equally important lesson of receiving graciously. During my first few months in Akron, I was quite sure that I never wanted to see my hometown again. Too many economic and social problems would beset me there. I would make a fresh start somewhere else. After 6 months of sobriety, I saw the picture in a different light. Detroit was the place that I had to return to, not only because I must face the mess that I had made there, but because it was there that I could be of the most service to AA. In the spring of 1939, Bill stopped off in Akron on his way to Detroit on business. I jumped at the suggestion that I accompany him. We spent 2 days there together before he returned to New York. Friends invited me to stay on for as long as I cared to. I remained with them for 3 weeks, using part of the time in making many amends, which I had had no earlier opportunity of making. The rest of my time was devoted to AA spade work. I wanted ripe prospects, and I didn't feel that I would get very far chasing individual drunks in and out of bars. So I spent much of my time calling on the people who I felt would logically come in contact with the alcoholic cases: doctors, ministers, lawyers, and personnel men in the industry. I also talked AA to every friend who would listen, at lunch, at dinner, on street corners. A doctor tipped me off to my first prospect. I landed him and shipped him by train to Akron with a pint of whiskey in his pocket to keep him from wanting to get off the train in Toledo. Nothing has ever to this day equaled the thrill of that first case. Those 3 weeks left me completely exhausted, and I had to return to Akron for 3 more months of rest. While there, 2 or 3 more cash customers, as Dr. Bob used to call them, probably because they had so little cash, shipped in to us from Detroit. When I finally returned to Detroit to find work and had to learn to stand on my own feet, the ball was already rolling, however slowly. But it took 6 more months of work and disappointments before a group of 3 men got together in my rooming house bedroom for their first AA meeting. It sounds simple, but there were obstacles and doubts to overcome. I well remember a session that I had with myself soon after I returned. It ran something like this: if I go around shouting from the rooftops about my alcoholism, it might very possibly prevent me from getting a good job. But supposing that just 1 man died because I had, for selfish reasons, kept my mouth shut. No, I was supposed to be doing God's will, not mine. His road lay clear before me, and I'd better quit rationalizing myself into any detours. I could not expect to keep what I had gained unless I gave it away. The depression was still on, and jobs were scarce. My health was still uncertain, so I created a job for myself selling women's hosiery and men's made-to-order shirts. This gave me the freedom to do AA work and to rest for periods of 2 or 3 days when I became too exhausted to carry on. There was more than one occasion when I got up in the morning with just enough money for coffee and toast and the bus fare to carry me to my first appointment. No sale, no lunch. During that first year, however, I managed to make both ends meet and to avoid ever going back to my old habit pattern of borrowing money when I could not earn it. Here by itself was a great step forward. During the first 3 months, I carried on all these activities without a car, depending entirely upon buses and streetcars. I, who always had to have a car at my immediate command. I, who had never made a speech in my life and who would have been frightened sick at the prospect, stood up in front of Rotary groups in different parts of the city and talked about Alcoholics Anonymous. I, carried away with the desire to serve AA, gave what was probably one of the first radio broadcasts about AA, living through a case of mic fright and feeling like $1 million when it was all over. I lived through a week of fidgets because I had agreed to address a group of alcoholic inmates in one of our state mental hospitals. There it was, the same reward, exhilaration at a mission accomplished. Do I have to tell you who gained the most out of all this? Within a year of my return to Detroit, AA was a definitely established little group of about 12 members, and I too was established in a modest but steady job handling an independent dry cleaning route of my own. I was my own boss. It took 5 years of AA living and a substantial improvement in my health before I could take a full-time office job where someone else was boss. All right, some great stuff here. A lot of positive things that are happening thanks to sobriety for our friend here, the man who has mastered fear. Definitely want to come back to this in just a minute. All right, my friends. So now we are on step 11 in the 12 and 12, which is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. So we're going to go ahead and read page 96 today. Prayer and meditation are our principal means of conscious contact with God. We AAs are active folk, enjoying the satisfactions of dealing with the realities of life, usually for the first time in our lives, and strenuously trying to help the next alcoholic who comes along. So it isn't surprising that we often tend to slight serious meditation and prayer as something not really necessary. To be sure, we feel it is something that might help us to meet an occasional emergency. But at first, many of us are apt to regard it as a somewhat mysterious skill of clergymen, from which we may hope to get a second-hand benefit. Or perhaps we don't believe in these things at all. To certain newcomers, and to those one-time agnostics who still cling to the AA group as their higher power, claims for the power of prayer may, despite all the logic and experience in proof of it, still be unconvincing or quite objectionable. Those of us who have once felt this way can certainly understand and sympathize. We well remember how something deep inside of us kept rebelling against the idea of bowing before any god. Many of us had strong logic too, which proved that there was no God whatever. What about all the accidents, sickness, cruelty, and injustice in the world? What about all those unhappy lives which were the direct result of the unfortunate birth and uncontrollable circumstances? Surely there could be no justice in the scheme of things, and therefore no God at all. All right, some interesting questions here for step 11, and definitely some questions I've asked myself about prayer and meditation and about the existence of the God of my understanding. So I can't wait to see what Bill W. has to say about that, because these, again, are very legit questions that I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, have had at one point. Going back to the big book real fast, I think it's just so fascinating and so beautiful how Dr. Bob and his wife Ann, they were literally taking people into their homes. Not just for, a few days. I mean, this guy was living with Dr. Bob and Ann for close to a year, getting back on his feet. And that just reminds me of what a very close friend always says to me, helping that one. This person, he knows that I'm a people pleaser, especially what I do for a living. I try to help a lot of people, and that really is good for my soul. But I could get wrapped up in the numbers, like, I'm not reaching enough, I'm not making a big enough difference or impact. Again, he didn't say this about my job or anything, but he just told me, when I'm working with other fellow alcoholics, just concentrate on the one. Try to help one. That's always helped me, and that's what Dr. Bob and Ann have done right here. They help the one, which in turn, this guy, he's helping others in Detroit. And it has that ripple effect. You throw one stone in a pond, one tiny little rock, and that ripple effect can echo all the way through that body of water. It has such a wide impact. But anyways, I love what our friend says here on page 252. Long before I had any real opportunity to give, I had to learn the equally important lesson of receiving graciously. I don't know if anybody's like me. I'm a people pleaser. I want to help people. But sometimes when somebody would help me, I didn't know how to receive that. Of course, I thanked them, but I almost felt like it was a burden to other people. And I didn't want them to be, put out because I was relying on them. It's okay. You don't have to help. I can do it myself. But receiving graciously, realizing that that person might want to help, might need to help me, and understanding that it's okay to receive help. Receiving graciously and thanking that person and making that person feel appreciated because they're trying to help. I can relate to that as well. So this man, he comes back to Detroit. At first he's like, I don't want to go back there. I've messed things up there. But then about, a few months after staying at Dr. Bob's, he realizes that, no, that's the perfect place to go back to. I can make my amends, and I can bring AA to Detroit, a major city. And then on page 253, I was supposed to be doing God's will, not mine. His road lay clear before me, and I better quit rationalizing myself into any detours. I could not expect to keep what I had gained unless I gave it away. And really, that's a big foundation of step 12. So we see that things are working out for this man. And this is one of the first stories where we're seeing a lot of pages dedicated to what happened during sobriety. See, a lot of these pioneer stories where we're hearing about what it was like before, and then maybe the last page is dedicated to their sobriety. So it's great to see a testimony where a big chunk of the story is life during sobriety and how many benefits there are. I know for me, putting the bottle down was one of the first benefits of sobriety. But what I've gained is a family through some fellowships. I've gained a stronger marriage. I've gained the opportunity to be a better father, to be more present. And I think the biggest thing that I've gained is peace. For the first time in my life. These are all things that came with sobriety. It wasn't just the not drinking part, as I've said a million times. So I'm so grateful to see that this man has gained a lot already. And we're still not done with the story, so I'm excited to see what else he gains. All because of the miracle of sobriety. And he mentions that word, the miracle of sobriety. So once again, my friends, if you are sober today, you are a miracle. And I'm sure the people that love you are very proud of you. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you all have a great one. And I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow.